So for the next 12 minutes or so, let's pretend that we're all sitting in a coffee shop or in a bar, and we're having a friendly conversation about the future of journalism. And the only difference is that for the next 12 minutes, I get to do all the talking. But then it'll be your turn later when we go outside. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. 20 years ago, I started a magazine called Fast Company. It became the fastest growing business magazine in the history of the United States. We said 4 things when we launched that magazine. We said, number 1, a great magazine must have a great purpose. Our purpose was to chronicle the changes going on in the new economy. We said, we're not actually a magazine, we're a movement, and we want to marshal a community to serve that great purpose. We said, we don't want to have the last word in a conversation with our readers. We only want to have the first word, which meant we wanted to spark a dialogue, a debate. We wanted to create discussion about important ideas. And finally, we said, a good question beats a good answer. So I'm going to talk about some of those things today as it relates to digital disruption, journalism, and in particular, newspapers. And the questions I have for us to talk about today are, will digital disruption produce better journalism and ultimately make us better citizens? What great purpose will journalism and newspapers play? And what can we do to get the journalism that we deserve and that we so desperately need? Now, I have to tell you, this is largely a perspective from my experience inside the United States. So you have to see it through the filter of the American experience. And in the context of the American experience, there's a great deal of hand-wringing and upset over what digital disruption has done to journalism and to newspapers. We've seen newspapers shrink, close down completely. We've seen journalists lose their jobs. At one point, the number of people working in journalism in the United States went from 60,000 to about 30,000. It was cut almost in half. And social media has taken over, things like the things we've been hearing about in this conference. Now, it's important to say at the beginning that what happens with journalism matters enormously. We need exceptional journalism today because we are living in exceptional times. And we need journalism not only to chronicle the changes that are going on, but to help us make sense of them. So what does digital media do? Let's take a quick look at what digital media does to change the world of journalism, or what makes it digital. First, it's fast. We get instant information delivered to our smartphones immediately. Almost before it happens, we know about it. It's democratic. Anyone, anywhere, anytime can now be a journalist. It's unfiltered. You are quite likely to see things videoed and presented on your smartphone or on your computer that you don't want to see, and yet you're confronted with them because there is no filter. It is absolutely direct to the user. It is largely visual. The smartphone of today used to be a reporter's notebook. Today, it's taking videos and capturing the world as it happens in real time. It's emotional. In the digital world, sensationalism comes before facts. It can be heroic. We get to see and learn about remarkable events that are done by very ordinary people. It can also be trivial. Lots of digital media concerns kitties and puppies and celebrities and gossip. It's transparent. There are no secrets in the world because everyone today is a journalist, and it is often just plain wrong. It doesn't get the facts right. Twitter, Facebook take off without getting their facts right, and then we all have to fix it later. Now, the interesting thing about that list is that almost all of them, at one time or another, were said about newspapers and journalism over the last 100 years. And very quickly in my country, we went through, starting in the 1910s, yellow journalism, which was all about scandal and made-up events, jazz journalism in the 20s, which was all about gossip and psychic events, responsible journalism, which tried to clean up yellow journalism and jazz journalism. And then we got new journalism, which was all about the individual writing about himself or herself. Accountability journalism, investigative journalism, collaboration, hyper-local journalism, advocacy journalism, and citizen journalism. It's constantly changing. Many of these things are much like what digital journalism does, but there are three things different about digital journalism. First, the speed of information. I won't even call it news, it's simply information delivered instantaneously. Second are the number of sources that are available. There is no longer someone acting as the editor or the news desk. It is every individual collecting and delivering news. No one is there to act as the editor. And third, it is personalized. You can have just the news you want delivered to your desktop or to your smartphone. The truth is that when you look at what has happened over the last decade or so with digital disruption, journalism, at least in the United States, needed to be disrupted. It had gotten lazy, it had gotten complacent, and it had forgotten that it needed a great purpose, a big idea. It no longer had a sense of why it really existed and why it mattered. And if the digital disruption hadn't come, something else would have come to change the face of journalism today. The challenge today is the opportunity to reimagine and reinvent journalism. There are three facets to most fields of journalism if you ask a newspaper editor. There's news, there's context, and there's investigative reporting. Those three things define what most newspapers or journalists contend with. News today is a commodity. The things we get on our smartphones as news or information are a commodity. And so all the news everywhere is pretty much the same as information. What we're lacking, what we desperately need, is context and investigative reporting. We need some journalists in the world who will provide information put into context. We need meaning, not news. And with all the fragmentation and disruption that's going on in the world, today the great purpose that journalism can serve is to provide meaning, to take the facts and arrange them in a pattern so that the chaos, the change, the rapid disruption of our lives can be presented to us in a way where we can make sense of it and then make sensible decisions about it. Otherwise, all we have are random bits of information. So what happens next as this world of journalism and digital disruption continues? Well, journalism will continue to adapt, to evolve. It has to if it wants to stay relevant, and we need it to adapt to serve our needs as citizens. It's important because if we want to change the future, which is what this gathering is about, we have to start by changing the conversation. That's the whole point of these dialogues, is to change the conversation about our future. And right now, the truth is we are spending far too much time talking about the wrong things. It's journalism's job to focus the conversation around what really matters and where we can find meaning in our lives, in our societies, in our communities, in our work. And to use investigative journalism not to report the news, but to focus on things that have not yet been talked about, to work in the white space where no one has yet discovered things that are going on, but that need to be brought to the surface. Now, this is a conference about action, about doing. What should we be doing to get the journalism that we deserve and that we need? First, Remember I said that a good question beats a good answer? We should all be asking better questions. More questions that have to do with why something is happening than what is happening. We should be insisting that our journalists and ourselves in conversation dig deeper. Don't just settle for the story. Ask about the story behind the story. How this is happening now. Why it is coming to the surface. Who are the actors who are framing the changes that are going on in the world? What's going on behind the surface? Third, we need to push the conversation forward. Don't settle for easy answers. Demand deep discussion and deep discovery. And finally, we need to pay for things that matter. The big disruption in journalism today is about economics. The old business model of newspapers, magazines have been demolished, and so talented journalists are looking for ways to make a living. We can ask them to be our sense makers, our meaning makers. We can ask them to be our investigative reporters, but it only works if we pay them to do that work. Twitter is free. Twitter should be free because of its value. You get what you pay for. What isn't free are professional journalists doing deep, serious work. And so we have to be, as citizens, prepared to pay for things that will make us better citizens. And so my challenge today is for all of us to put our money where our minds are, and then to put our minds where the future is. Thank you.